Good afternoon. It's Saturday, the 5th of September. I'm Erin Viner, and this is IBA News broadcasting from Jerusalem. We open with a European refugee crisis and the streaming of thousands into Austria today aboard buses provided by the overwhelmed government of neighboring Hungary, which has completely given up on any attempts to hold back the flood of humanity surging toward Western Europe. After days of confrontation and chaos, Budapest's right-wing government deployed dozens of buses to move the migrants out of the capital and pick up more than 1,000 others headed down the main highway on foot in their attempts to reach Vienna. Austrian officials say that they and Germany have now agreed to allow access to the asylum seekers who resisted being processed at the first point of entry, subsequently causing the collapse of the European Union procedure. Thousands of exhausted people, including many carrying children in their arms, climbed off the buses on the Hungarian side of the border, then formed a long line to walk into Austria, where they were given fruit and water by aid workers. Yesterday, hundreds broke out of an overcrowded camp on the Hungarian border with Serbia. Others escaped from a stranded train running away from riot police, while still others sought out highways leading them to richer nations in Western Europe. By nightfall, the Budapest railway terminal that served as a campsite for those barred from taking westbound trains to Austria and Germany this past week was almost empty, as families boarded a fleet of buses that transported them to Austria. Officials at the United Nations Refugee Agency say that stopgap measures are not enough and that an exceptional response is needed to address the migrant crisis.
We are facing exceptional circumstances. We need an exceptional response. Business as usual or incremental improvements of mechanisms in place will not be able to address what it is today, a massive refugee and migration crisis in Europe. What we are witnessing is that it has been essentially a German solution, because Germany has been the country that has received the largest number of refugees, both direct asylum seekers and in relation to mechanisms of humanitarian admission. What we need is to have a European solution for a European problem, because I don't think it is possible, I don't think it is sustainable to have, together with a few other countries that are also contributing, to have a German solution for a European problem.
Here at home, opposition leader Isaac Herzog is calling on the government to absorb Syrian refugees fleeing the ongoing fighting in their nation's civil war. The Zionist Union leader made the call while speaking at a cultural event in Tel Aviv today, where he also appealed that serious action be taken to convene an international conference on the humanitarian tragedy as quickly as possible. Herzog stressed that the Jewish people cannot remain indifferent as hundreds of thousands desperately seek asylum. Turning to the Iranian nuclear deal, and in a blow to the White House, key Senator Ben Cardin of Maryland has announced his opposition to the agreement. The vote of the top-ranking Democrat on the Foreign Relations Committee is critical. He authored the legislation enabling Congress to review the July 14th pact that is aimed at curbing nuclear development in the Islamic Republic in exchange for relief from international economic sanctions. Even though the administration of U.S. President Barack Obama has already amassed enough votes to sustain his expected veto of the resolution, Cardin's opposition makes it more difficult for Obama to achieve his best-case scenario of the Democrats preventing the resolution from even passing. Suspense over the outcome was further heightened yesterday by twin announcements from Cardin and Democratic Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado moments earlier, who said that he would back the deal. With Bennet on board, backers are now just 3 votes shy of reaching the 41 out of the 100 senators needed to block the resolution from passing by using a filibuster. Riyadh has expressed satisfaction with assurances received from Washington concerning the nuclear deal. That's the message from Saudi Foreign Minister Adel Al-Jubeir following the meeting of his nation's King Salman bin Abdulaziz with Obama at the White House, aimed at garnering greater support to counter Tehran's destabilizing role in the Middle East and elsewhere. The monarch's visit to the U.S. is his first since ascending to the throne in January of this year. The U.S.-Saudi relationship has been strained because of what Riyadh sees as Obama's withdrawal from the region, including the lack of direct American action against Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, as well as a perceived U.S. tilt toward Iran since the 2011 Arab uprisings. After the Washington talks between Obama and Salman, Jubeir explained the kingdom's position.
The Kingdom of Saudi was satisfied with these assurances after having spent the last 2 months consulting with our allies in Europe and other places with regards to this agreement, and we believe that this agreement will contribute to security and stability in the region by preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear capability, and we hope that the Iranians will avail themselves of this opportunity in order to use the openness to the world and the additional income that they receive to fund domestic development rather than engage in nefarious activities in the region. And we hope that this will be a turning point in the history of Iran, and that Iran will act as a responsible neighbor, and that Iran will respect the principles of non-interference, and that Iran will cease supporting terrorism and will cease stoking sectarian fires.
Iran is expected to also be a focus of the talks that Netanyahu is scheduled to hold with British Prime Minister David Cameron in London this coming Wednesday. Security officials fear that the state visit may spark a series of large demonstrations, including a protest now being organized by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign on Downing Street. Anti-Israel activists from other groups, including the Stop the War Coalition, are also calling on their supporters to oppose Netanyahu's presence in the British capital. The Israeli leader is slated to hold a number of meetings while in central London, including bilateral talks with senior governmental figures as well as local leaders of the Jewish community. Even though he's returning home on Friday, just one day before the announcement of Britain's Labour Party elections, Netanyahu is unlikely to meet with the front-running candidate Jeremy Corbyn, who is strongly pro-Palestinian and accused of being anti-Semitic. As part of protests against the Prime Minister's London visit, an online petition has gathered 93,000 signatures calling on the UK government to arrest him for war crimes charges upon his arrival in the country. Nevertheless, British journalist and author Melanie Phillips told Israel Television's Yaakov Achimeir that the petition has no legal standing.
In practical legal terms, this petition will go nowhere. As the head of state, Mr. Netanyahu is covered by diplomatic immunity, which means he cannot be arrested and prosecuted.
I'm talking about the numbers, yes. More than 85,000 people.
Indeed, and at 100,000 signatures on this government petition website, at 100,000 signatures, the government may or may not permit a debate in Parliament on the subject of the petition. The point is to engender a climate, to continue to foment a climate in which Israel is painted in diabolical terms.
Do they succeed?
Yes. In Britain they have succeeded to a very large degree. Among the intelligentsia, it is a given that Israel is the principal actor in the region. It drives events. It's never the victim of events. It drives events. So the victimization of Israelis, the attacks on Israelis, by whoever, by the Hamas from Gaza or by West Bank terrorists, West Bank-based terrorists, these things are never reported. The only thing that's reported in the British media is if and when Israel responds with a military kind of response. In other words, Israel is the driver in the region. Israel is considered to be the principal, in fact, the only reason why there is no peace in the Middle East. Nowhere in Britain is it ever reported what the Palestinian Authority presides over, the culture of indoctrination of its children from the cradle into hatred of Israelis, the belief that they're indoctrinated, they're inculcated with the aspiration that their highest goal in life is to grow up and murder Israelis and to take back not just the West Bank settlements, but to take back Yaffo, to take back Haifa, to take back Jerusalem. Nowhere in Britain is this ever reported. Nowhere in Britain is the demented Jew hatred that pours out of the Palestinian Authority, the Hamas-based and Palestinian-based propaganda that is now dominant in the British universities, in the British media, in the British cultural elites. Ordinary British people who don't belong to those elites know very little, but they are predisposed to think that black is black and white is white. Unfortunately, the elites which dominate the culture now say black is white and white is black.
Do you believe that Mr. Netanyahu will be able to change this view, to change this atmosphere in one meeting with Mr. Cameron. They were considered friends.
I would imagine that Prime Minister Netanyahu is particularly exercised by Britain's support for the American-led initiative on Iran and would wish to try to educate Mr. Cameron into the realities of the region. Now, whether he can do that, I have no idea. The impact that Mr. Netanyahu is likely to have on the British public is likely to be, in terms of positive impact, zero.
Newly appointed Minister of Science, Technology and Space, Ophir Akunis, has resigned his previous appointment without portfolio at the Communications Ministry, where he was in charge of the Israel Broadcasting Authority. The decision came just hours after Prime Minister Netanyahu announced that he will work to cancel a controversial clause supported by Akunis added to the new state broadcasting legislation that barred IBA journalists from expressing opinions on the air. That amendment was approved by the Knesset in a late-night session earlier this week and was seen as an attempt to silence anti-government views, sparking widespread outcry, primarily among many senior journalists who deemed it as violating the freedom of speech and being contrary to the very basis of democracy. Yesterday, Netanyahu, who also serves as the communication minister, said that he would amend the clause because he believes that ethical rules for journalists should not be decided upon in legislation. Akunis implied that he decided to quit because he felt as though his hands were tied and that he could no longer advance the new legislation. For her part, Zionist Union member of Knesset Tzipi Livni today called on the government to cancel the controversial clause as soon as this coming Monday when the Knesset convenes to vote on the natural gas proposal. Speaking at a cultural event of her own in Cholon, Livni appealed for Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon and his Kulanu party to condition their vote on the gas deal on the immediate nullification of what she called the archaic and dangerous clause that stands to jeopardize freedom of speech and democracy in the nation. The Palestinian resident of Hebron, who saved 5 American Jewish seminary students from a lynching Thursday night, is describing his actions as the only humane thing to do. In footage captured by a surveillance camera, 51-year-old Fayez Rayeth says that he was in fear of their lives and called out to the group to enter his apartment after seeing them from his porch being surrounded by an angry mob. When he brought the group water and bandages for 2 of the lightly wounded victims, he said that one kissed his hand in gratitude. The yeshiva students were en route to pray at the Cave of the Patriarchs when their navigational system misdirected them to drive into the Palestinian neighborhood of Jabal Johar. They were surrounded by rioting residents who hurled rocks at their car and looted it before setting it on fire. They were eventually escorted out of Rayeth's home by the IDF about 40 minutes later in a coordinated effort by the Civil Administration of Judea-Samaria, Palestinian Authority security forces, and a police reconnaissance unit. One of the Americans discussed the incident in a telephone interview before the Sabbath with Israel Television's Ayala Hasson.
So I was on the way to Marat HaMachpelah, and I go with the Waze GPS, and they took me in Hebron, in middle of Hebron. And in the middle, I see the big stones coming in the windows. They break all the windows. They break the car, and the tires start to burn.
You were surrounded by hundreds of teenagers?
Kids and teenagers. They're throwing big rocks and stones and all this kind of things. And there's also like bombs, small bombs to burn the car. And before they burned it, there's come one Arab, and he take us out. He take me out from the window, and he run with us a whole hill to his house, and he take us in his house.
You know his name? You know the name of the guy who saved you?
I hear from his name, but yes.
Fauzi Ret.
Okay.
We know the guy. He took you to his house?
To his house, he give me water, give me chargers for the phones because 2 phones is burned. I only have a phone, and my friend, he don't have the battery.
He took all of you to his house, or only you?
5, yeah, all 5 to his house.
When he took you to his house, all of you, the people around, all the teenagers around, they didn't follow you to his house?
They start to run after us, but the Arab, but he start to scream, and everybody go away from us. They take us in the house. I take my phone and I start to call the police. I dial 100. and I tried to talk to them, and I call them every minute for 20 minutes. I don't see no process. Nobody's coming. Nobody hears us.
You mean when you call 100 from his house, nobody reply your call?
Nobody's listening to me. I was there for 20 minutes, no answer, nobody's coming, nobody take us out of there. So they think, I don't know what they think. Maybe they thought that somebody makes a joke. I don't know.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has informed the leaders of Egypt, Saudi Arabia and Jordan that he wishes to give up on political life, according to today's Pan-Arab Al-Hayat newspaper, reporting that the 80-year-old leader intends to step down in stages with the selection of his successors through an electoral process. The first stage involves replacing him as the chairman of the Palestine Liberation Organization and the Fatah movement, from which he announced earlier this week that he would not seek re-election following his resignation from the PLO Executive Committee last month. Since being elected to serve a 4-year term 11 years ago, Abbas has threatened to resign several times and even to dissolve the Palestinian Authority. Sources close to him say that he has reached the end of his patience with the stagnant peace process with Israel. One of the ways to encourage immigration to Israel is the Nile program, which was established in 1992 as a joint initiative of the Prime Minister's office and the Ministry of Education, which fully subsidizes it. The program enables Jewish high school students from around the world to study and finish high school here in the country. Arut Sheva caught up with Nile's director as he was greeting the latest participants at the airport.
Nile is a program for studying, first of all, and when the program is finished after 3 or 4 years, they have to decide whether they want to stay here. They become new olim. Till that time, they are tourists here and students. That's it.
How are your stats regarding how many people actually stay at the end and immigrate to Israel?
Those who finish the program, I mean after 3 or 4 years, around 90% of them stays in Israel.
So what motivates them to come?
The word is future and Jewish education. Those who are Americans sometimes cannot afford Jewish education at home because it's very, very expensive. Those who think maybe they have an idea about making Aliyah later on, once the child is here in an Israeli school, finished Israeli matriculation and ready for entering the Israeli society. This is, from our point of view, the best way how to immigrate to Israel. From their point of view, they send a representative of the family. If he succeeds, they will follow him.
Now, we understand that there's more and more interest in this program from France.
Yes, of course, it's not enough that Israel is attractive. Something has to push them out. Now in France, it's very, very, let's say, warm atmosphere, and people are looking about changing their status and their place. And those families, they decided at the moment not to make Aliyah because of different circumstances, but to send a boy or a girl in advance. And I believe, especially from France, if the children will succeed here, parents will come after them.
Academy Award-winning actress Natalie Portman returned home to the country earlier this week for the screening premiere of her latest feature film, A Tale of Love and Darkness, based on the autobiographical novel of renowned Israeli author Amos Oz. Portman makes her directorial debut and stars as Oz's suicidal mother in the Hebrew language movie, which depicts the story of a family escaping the Holocaust and seeking refuge in the Jewish state during its founding years. Speaking at a festive ceremony in her native city of Jerusalem this week, the 34-year-old actress, whose birth name was Natalie Hirschlag and moved to the United States with her parents when she was 3, said that the production also mirrors the story of her own family. Portman's paternal great-grandparents perished at Auschwitz, and her grandparents immigrated to pre-state Israel. She said that among the many things that she hopes to convey in the film is that Israel's early self-image as a land of orphans coming out of the Holocaust may have been blind to some of the realities on the ground.
I believe in this country and I believe in the people that it can be the best version of itself, and I think that's sort of the end of this film deals with, you know, there's this gap, there's this chasm between dreams and reality. And if we go into despair because of that chasm, it's suicide. And if we hold on to the dream and still push for the dream, despite all evidence to the contrary, then that's how we still can bring love and light and hope. I do obviously love this country, but I'm also quite critical of, as I think every engaged citizen should be, is critical of the things that you believe your country isn't doing to the best of its ability.
The IBA weather team says that we can expect a warm start to the week with clear to partly cloudy skies and a slight rise in temperatures tomorrow. Here's the forecast to home and abroad over the next 24 hours. Thank you for being with us this afternoon. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow, and Laura Cornfield will be here to bring you the latest breaking news from Israel. I'm Erin Viner, wishing you a great week, and shalom from Jerusalem.